From the studios of Cheshire TV in Keene, Hampshire, it's The Men's Room, a show by men, about men, and for everyone. Sponsored by the Monadnock Men's Resource Center and hosted by Damien Licata and Forrest Seymour.
Hello everyone, welcome back to The Men's Room. I'm Damien Licata and this is Forrest Seymour. And we are back again to have a really interesting conversation with a guest from our community.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
The show, the Men's Room, is sponsored by the Monadnock Men's Resource Center, which until recently has also sponsored a drop-in support group for men, which is sadly, but with also some celebration, coming to an end.
After 6 years.
6 years.
Yeah.
6 years. Over around 300 consecutive
Sundays. That's right.
Yeah.
That represents a lot of men
walking
through that door and having conversations. And there is one last this Sunday.
This Sunday, which if you catch this show when it's first on the air, you could
still make the plan.
That's right.
To be there.
It's Sunday, March 16th, 7 o'clock at 25 Roxbury Street.
That's right.
And the last and the best, probably the best.
If 30 people show up, we might consider keeping it going.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I plan to be there. Also, we want to be sure to mention that the Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, the Men's March to End Sexual Violence, is coming up on April 12th.
That's right.
And you can it's a fundraiser for the Monadnock Center for Violence Prevention. There's a lot of information about that, some kind of cool, easy ways to raise money online. And you can get to that from our website, which is, you'll see at the end of the show, but it's www.mmrconline.org. So
that's right.
We'll roll that at the end of the show, too.
Yep.
But go there to get more information about the Walk a Mile. It's a very cool event. It's going to be really big this year. I think I'm hearing that it's co-sponsored with the Keene State College, and that the fraternities at Keene State College are like signing on en masse.
Coming out in force.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So
it's great.
It's going to be a big thing. It's the second annual one. So.
Really exciting. It was a lot of fun last time.
It was.
Last year.
It was, except for the sore feet.
Because
men are encouraged to wear women's shoes.
Yeah,
so.
right. And I did it for part of the walk, and then I bailed.
You had some serious shoes.
I had, yeah. They were stunning, though, I have to tell you.
You look good. You look good. Yeah. There's some photos of that on our website.
That's right.
Well.
That's right.
Go to there.
You can download those.
Print them out. And
that's right.
Do whatever you want with them.
That's between you and your computer.
Should we move on to our great guests that we have?
Yeah.
Well, it's great to have with us today Len Fleischer, who is the co-chair of the Education Department at Keene State College, although he's currently on sabbatical. He's also the coordinator of the school counseling graduate program at Keene State. He's a licensed psychologist in private practice that works with adolescents and families for the most part. And what really caught our interest, amongst all these other great things that we might be able to talk about, is that he does some rite of passage work, a rite of passage guide with the Animas Valley Institute out west, the western part of the country. So,
we definitely want to hear about that.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us, Len.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming to the Men's Room.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the Animas Valley program, what that is about.
Yeah, a good place to start might be to explain the name, the Animas. Where does that come from?
Well, it's kind of an interesting irony. It comes from the Spanish term for the river that runs through Durango, Colorado, which is in the southwestern corner of Colorado, which translates, I won't do the Spanish, translates to the river of lost souls. Animas is the word for soul in Spanish and Latin. Since this is an organization that actually does work at a level of soul for people, and I'll explain that, it seemed very appropriate. So it's the river that runs through Durango, Colorado, which is where the organization is based.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
So you tinker with people's souls, then?
Well, if by soul, what we mean is what sort of runs beneath our ordinary, everyday activity, our socialized behavior, our ego-based kind of activity. And what we're looking for is providing opportunities for people, adolescents and adults, to really take a look at, what is really going on, what kind of people they really want to be, helping people understand their purpose, their understanding of life, answering big questions.
Finding meaning.
Meaning, and so rite of passage really is an old way of talking about when we think about working with adolescents, which is what I mostly do. What does it mean to be a genuine adult in whatever culture we're in? And cultures have always done this for thousands of years. Indigenous cultures, traditional cultures, always had a way to help the young people move into a meaningful adulthood. Not by current definition, a responsible adulthood where you pay taxes and take out life insurance and all those kinds of things. But how do you embody, your sense of who you are and show up in the world in a way that really has some significance? And in our culture, we don't have rites of passage for young people.
Or they're left to make them up on their own.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
What we have is young people kind of initiating each other
Right.
into what it means to be an adult.
Right.
So we
Which
have
is
situations like, first sex, or using substances, or getting a
Driving,
driver's
yeah.
license, or
driving fast.
and abandoning the family, and that's a notion of now I'm an adult, because we don't really have any cultural markers of that are really feel genuine to young people. So they make it up for themselves, and often, I think, at great cost for the culture.
I think it's interesting that, we have had, there are a number of organizations that are seem to be popping up that are doing this kind of initiation
Right.
sort of work, and there seems to be a real recognition of this need now in our society, and this lack of, as you say, of it as being sort of an integral part of our culture. It's not.
Right.
All of these things are sort of extra-cultural. They're not really part of our culture. Do you see a time or a way in which this could become more integral to our culture, or would you imagine we've sort of gone beyond that, and that it's always going to be sort of like an add-on, this sort of?
It's a really good question. I think what we first have to realize is that initiation happens no matter what. It's almost like a part of being human, maybe even genetic, that in order to move through adolescence into adulthood, there has to be this sense of transition and transformation and identity development. There's all kinds of theories of what identity really is.
Yeah.
But one of them is knowing who you are and how you want to show up in the world. We have all kinds of often dysfunctional models of initiation. Witness gangs. Gang culture is an attempt, probably not a real effective one, for young people to be initiated into some community, some sense of belonging, some identification that gives them some meaning and purpose. So I think if the culture could take a look at the fact that we don't really have healthy models, particularly, that we all can buy into, we're going to continue to have young people making it up as they go along.
So what are the characteristics of what the work you do with adolescents at Animas? And how is that different than being a part of a gang? Obviously it is.
Sure.
But how does that differ from these other sorts of rites transitions that
Sure.
you're talking
about? We have a variety of programs that include some traditional elements of rites of passage, which include a group process and kind of taking a look at ego-based identity and more genuine or soul-based identity, as I mentioned earlier. Interaction with nature, which is an important component, another thing that we're sort of losing in our modern culture. Doing various programs that help people identify the movement, and I'm thinking of adolescents now because that's mostly what I do, movement from social approval to self-approval is one way I think about what happens in adolescence. Like, how do you get to the point where you're more internally directed as opposed to what is often the case in adolescence and actually in adulthood?
Yes.
How do I construct myself in a way that isn't based on what the external world wants me to be, what I think is popular or acceptable? How do I derive meaning from a sense of self-direction? So we do a variety of work on that. And there's also a piece in these programs of actually going out for a solo component with a question, what is it? What kind of life do I want to live, and what am I ready to leave behind?
Like going out into the wilderness.
Literally going out into the wilderness, and in certain programs going out for 3 days without food, just water, no entertainment, and just kind of wrestling with what's my story, and with the idea of leaving old ways behind and making a kind of ceremonial marker of that. And on the return, what can I bring back of who I've discovered in terms of not only my own personal transformation, but what I might offer to what Native Americans used to call my people or my community. What do I have to offer? Because the whole notion of contacting yourself authentically or understanding soul is to offer service back to the community.
Place yourself in the communities.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm curious about the fasting aspect of that. When you said that you go out into the wilderness often without food, just water, obviously, to sustain yourself so you don't get dehydrated. But I understand, the separation from the distraction and from the of everyday life and and all of the gadgets and trappings of modern life.
Sure.
But I'm curious about the fasting aspect of it, the deprivation from food. What purpose does that serve?
Speaking as an Italian, you
Speaking as
cannot
somebody
wrap
who-
your head around that.
Somebody who
Couldn't
can't skip a meal.
imagine it, right?
Right.
Well, it's a good question. Part of it, quite honestly, is transformation of consciousness and getting into an alternate consciousness. When you don't eat for 3 days,
Right.
you do feel certain kind of physiological and psychological changes, and it's very deliberate. Sometimes I get in, some trouble for saying this because I speak to parent groups and I talk about one of the primary purposes, primary needs of adolescents is to transform their consciousness. And while I don't advocate taking drugs, I think it's helpful for parents and other adults to understand that often the impetus for doing that sort of thing, taking substances for young people, is to transform consciousness, to really try on and really explore new identity. Because one way I think about adolescence is all about finding who I am and what my identity is and who I am in the world. And so in the same spirit, this has done the fasting piece and the solo piece, which people actually find a much harder time being alone than being hungry, by our reports and my own experience. The alone part is really the tough part. But you go through a kind of transformative experience. I mean, you don't lose your mind or go crazy, but you really are engaged with sort of raw stuff. You're out by yourself, you're hungry, you're cold, you're lonely, you're dealing with just yourself, and there's nothing to distract you.
To face yourself.
I
I have not done anything like that myself, but I have talked to a lot of people who have, and I know it's really moving for them. And also, just for any viewers we have who might not be familiar with this sort of thing, I assume that there's a certain kind of holding that's going on, despite someone being off for 3 days in the wilderness, that there is some kind of check-in or some sort of way of making sure that they're really okay.
Absolutely, yeah. There are
Just to
all kinds
reassure.
of safety procedures.
You're not just
and-
tossing these teenagers out in the out in the valley and saying, "Come back in 3 days."
No.
Change.
There's all kinds of, safety in place there, and there are ways to check on them, and we do. And there's this holding container or environment back at what's called the base camp, where they can come back in, and will come back in, hopefully at the end of their 3 days. Occasionally, people will come in early, and we talk with them, and often they go back out. But there is this, place for them that is their community that they can return to, hopefully with some newly won vision of who they are.
So what is, I mean, we've sort of touched on this, but what is the role then of you, for example, if you're working with adolescents and you are the leader of some sort, but how, I mean, there's like a mentor sort of role, or what is the role of the elder versus the initiate?
Well, that's a good question, and I think part of the whole cultural piece that we were talking about earlier, and what we lack, it seems to me, in our culture today is not only do we have kids who are trying to figure it out basically on their own, but we have a lot of adults, most adults in our culture, sort of bailing out on being mentors. And one thing that I think indigenous cultures knew well is that it couldn't be the parents who would help their young be in the transition to adulthood. That it took the community, it took the village, and it took specific mentors who were friends of the family to help guide young people. So what mentors do is to set the frame for the young people, help them develop their own individual questions that they want to work with, and most importantly, support them as they come back in from their individual journey, and help them frame it, put it together, understand it, but not interpret it, but just rather mirror it, and be a sustaining presence beyond. So it's not just an experience and then they go off into their lives, but that we stay connected in multiple ways.
Even after the initial...
Right, to help them with their continuing development into adulthood.
Now, is this program for both adolescent boys and girls?
It is.
And how is the experience different, if it is different, for boys and girls?
Well, I think it is quite different. Many ways the same, but quite different for males. For one thing, doing this sort of thing in some ways appeals to males. The whole notion of what various mythologists have called the hero's journey, which is really one way to think about the vision quest. You go out and you encounter challenge and danger, and you struggle, for hard-won wisdom, and if you survive, you come back to your community with your gift for the community.
Is this a more conceptually more appealing to boys, this idea?
I think that's been my experience. That conceptually they resonate with it. And if you think about old mythology or modern mythology, Star Wars or that sort of thing, that's a consistent theme, that there are male heroes. I think there's also the heroine's journey, which I think has different permutations. But this is something that young men resonate with, because it's the notion of challenge, testing oneself, outward directedness. I'm going to go out there and find out, who my ogres are and who my monsters are. I'm going to wrestle with them, and I'm going to vanquish them and come back. So there's something appealing about that. On the other hand, the hard part, I think, is both framing the question and dealing with the emotions that come up when you do this sort of work.
It's not just about battling the ogre. It's about the experience and what it feels like, and who is the ogre, and it's exploring the experience.
And the exploration obviously can be a very vulnerable process. You know, you really are touching on tender parts of yourself. You're looking at something that we call sacred wound, which means, you know, old stuff that is old templates of hurt and dysfunction, and dealing with that. And you know, the reason we call it sacred is that, you know, the wound also holds potentially the gift
I like
you
that
can use.
sacred wound. That's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do is we have gender councils as part of this. And council is a Native American process which actually is replicated in many cultures. It's just sitting in circle and having an opportunity to talk to one's peers from the heart and being listened to from the heart, one at a time, and entering into, you know, a different kind of speech than we ordinarily do, a more mindful and intentional speech. And what we do every time in these experiences is we have counsel for the males and for the females, and then we blend the counsel and really talk about what we have learned in our own. So sometimes we'll talk with the young men, because I lead them, about you know, their experiences with women, and this works for heterosexual or homosexual men. It doesn't really matter. Their experiences of women, what concerns they have about their own behavior toward women, their own responsibility for causing hurt to women, and also their awareness of their questions of understanding and what they don't understand about females. And then we bring those questions together and we have an incredible conversation about those struggles. And the women do the same thing. And, you know, we've had, you know, I was thinking of one last year where there happened to be 3 young women who had been raped. And they described to the guys for the first time from their report to speaking to males about their experience of that, and it was extraordinary.
But that was transformative for
Transformative
everybody.
is definitely the word.
Yeah, transformative, and you know that implies that there is some before and after to this. And you know, if you could, obviously it's different for probably as different as many, you know, kids as participate in this. But if you could describe what would be a more or less typical or common before and after for someone going through this experience, for an adolescent going through this experience, how would you do that?
Well, what we have is typically at the beginning a fair amount of skepticism. Is this some sort of cult? Is this some sort of new age hoo-ha? You know, is it, are they going to do mind control on me? And what we try to do is to really normalize it, both in terms of the kind of structure and ritual that we do, make it modern. It's not, you wouldn't identify it as any particular Native American or Celtic or whatever kind of thing. We're really careful about our language in terms of this is what human beings have, all of us, as questions. Like, who am I? What kind of person am I? And who do I want to be in this world?
Right.
And we keep it really straight that way. And at first they're nervous. They're doing their kind of typical sort of moves that people do, I do, when I don't know a situation and I'm a little anxious. And we, I think one of the strong messages we give is, and I think this particularly applies to young men, is, you know, this is a situation that you don't have to spill your guts and just, you know, be any particular way that doesn't feel authentic. We just want you to have the opportunity, if you take it, to do some exploration.
And you find, and I just have to say, we only have
Sure.
a couple of minutes left, if you can believe that.
Really?
Yeah, I know. Isn't it amazing? The time always just rushes by. So what happens after then? I mean, do they get it sometimes? Is there a shift?
I would say there's a tremendous shift. I think what we have is initiated young people, young men particularly, I think it's critical, who have a much deeper sense of themselves and what they can offer to the world. They have a heightened sensitivity to others, often to women. They feel a sense of personal power and a personal agency that they hadn't before, and they're just more attuned. They know how to move more surely in the world.
Yeah.
They kind of find their feet because they find their heart, and they are able to sort of focus on what really matters as opposed to what they thought that the culture wanted them to do.
Well, I mean, it sounds amazing, and I feel like I have so many other questions, you know, like I really want to know how you've got involved in this, and so we're going to have you back again,
Okay.
so we can get
we
into
can talk about this some
a
more.
little more depth
Thank you.
and some other things.
Enjoyed
too.
speaking with you.
Yeah, well,
No,
thanks
it's great.
so much.
It's great work too, and
Yeah.
I commend you for doing it. I'm glad that there are folks out there who are paying attention to these things.
Appreciate it.
And a quick question.
Yeah.
So, is there anything like this in this area that you're familiar with?
Well, I mean, one of the things through this organization, I do do workshops in upstate New York, which is a little closer to home. And my intention is to bring, because I was just out in California for my sabbatical, where I went to San Francisco and Los Angeles and actually saw council taking place in schools, boys groups in middle schools and high schools using the council model that I was talking about. And one of the things I hope to do through Keene State and in local schools is to do some workshops and introducing this idea, because I think if schools are where young people are, and to actually be able to do this sort of thing in a school-based model
Right.
Yeah.
could be really very potent.
That's exciting.
That
That's
sounds really
exciting.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll catch up again.
Okay.
We'll check in with
No,
you.
we
Thank
got to
you
go
much.
before they just turn the lights out on us.
That's
here.
right. That's
So,
right. So we have like 30 seconds.
Yeah,
here.
we have 30 seconds, and we have. I want to just say that there is one more men's group
That's right.
this Sunday, and I would
Sunday the 16th,
Yeah.
7 o'clock.
I would
25
encourage any men,
Rochester.
anybody out there who's come to one of these groups in the past and who were regulars to this group. It would be a nice time to show up and just have some final meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Final
So-
meeting, council.
A council.
That's
We'll
right.
do a council. So thanks everyone for
Yep.
tuning into the men's room, and we will see you again next week with another brand new show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
So thank you. Yeah, that's great. Interesting stuff.
You've been watching The Men's
Talk too
Room,
much.
sponsored
Not at
by
all.
the Monadnock
I thought it
Men's
was 5
Resource
minutes
Center
or-
and
I know,
hosted
I
by
know.
Len
That's what
Fleischer, co-director of the MMRC and executive director of the Granite State Monarchs, and Forrest Seymour, co-director of the MMRC and a therapist in private practice in Keene. You can learn more about the Monadnock Men's Resource Center, see past shows online, and find our Cheshire TV schedule at mmrconline.org. And thanks for joining us in the Men's Room.